us, then it becomes almost impossible to counter what we are seeing in front of us. And so then that brings me to, what did Rwanda do when the world abandoned Rwanda to itself? Rwanda reached into itself and had conversations with itself and decided we actually had homegrown methods that could work in the current situation. We don't have to wait for somebody else to come in. So all these homegrown methods came up, and they are so impressive in terms of how to deal with each particular situation. And the video that we saw when we first came in spoke to some of those homegrown methods. And so then, now I'm speaking to the African Union, I'm speaking to the East African community, and I'm asking, when do we look into these homegrown methods of sorting out some of these issues? Because these homegrown methods will also speak to the larger problems, and the larger problems include the fact that if you go to the Kivus today, or to much of Africa, you'll find weapons that not even national armies have. Where are these weapons coming from? We know that there is an existing willing seller, willing buyer market for these weapons in this continent, but we must speak to the fact of who is arming these armed groups, who is benefiting from armed groups being armed. So we must speak to those facts. So speaking to a community approach, we are speaking to looking into ourselves and thinking. So we've been looking out to the world and trying to get solutions for what is going on. We've been trying as much as possible to bring out the issues that are happening. We've been trying to bring out these narratives, and when I say we, I'm speaking about the fact that even I, in my previous position, the things I'm saying now, I said them. I used to put out statements and say, this is what is happening. But then, the larger aspect of that speaks against the truth, that is what we must speak against, because we really must tell the truth. And let's never again means nothing. We must tell the truth. And as I said earlier, that communities who've already been targeted for genocide are 3 times likely to be targeted again. The stereotypes exist. You've had the explanation that if you stand on a street in Europe and talk about cockroaches, nobody will understand. But those who are being called to action will understand that this is the moment to go again for a community that's been targeted for genocide. So we must reach into ourselves. This is the year 2025. We must remember what it felt like after the genocide in 1994 and ask ourselves honestly, what is it that made those who do not speak for the Tutsi today not speak for them? Really ask yourself that question. Really ask your governments that question. Really ask your governments, what is this that makes it possible to stand with perpetrators of genocide? Why would any government stand with perpetrators of genocide? So, and of course, I end by saying what I began by saying in the beginning, that if your government is protecting genocide perpetrators, it's absolutely important to ask the question, why are we protecting genocide perpetrators? People who have been indicted by an international criminal tribunal, why are we protecting them? And they are all over the world. So I've spoken specifically about the over 530 in DRC. There are many others in many other countries. And we must really, really, really ask of ourselves questions. How meaningful can the 31st commemoration of the genocide against the Tutsi be if we cannot speak to the fact that we have allowed perpetrators to live free, we have allowed perpetrators to continue the genocide ideology, we have allowed narratives that are completely false to be put out against a victim community. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much for those words. Quite edifying, and I would like to thank you all panelists for that, for really putting everything into perspective. The continuation of the genocide ideology entails the continuation of the genocide against the Tutsi. It merely changed locale. And because of our shared history in the region, because of our identity-based politics, right? It has enabled this genocide ideology to just merely change borders. Borders are kind of end up being meaningless in the grand scheme of things. And we have to confront this ideology as a political project, which has a lot of interested stakeholders, colonial powers, international community, which at this point, passivity is complicity to some certain extent. And we have to confront the real facts surrounding the genocide against the Tutsi, the real existential threat to the Tutsi community in the region. And when we consider the existential threat to Rwanda, we're talking about it's an existential threat to the entire regional community, really. We have to confront these facts. We have to confront and challenge the gaps and failures of the international systems and national systems in place, as so eloquently put by Florida. So I'd like to thank you. I'm going to very, very briefly, because we are very, very pressed for time, open the floor to just 2 questions. And if you have questions, to just very, very briefly ask your question, and one of our very esteemed panelists will be able to answer the question. So we have one question there, and let me identify another person who would be willing to ask a question. So, sorry. So table 14 and this gentleman there. Yes, let's start with table 14. Thank you.
My name is Innocent Nziryayo. I'm a member of collective of lawyers of Banyamulenge, Tutsi, and Hema. I'm glad to be here today. My question is about what His Excellency Minister Bizumana has made it clear that which I quote, in 2003, the UN established the obligation to commemorate the 1994 genocide against Tutsi, and this was reaffirmed by Security Council in 2014. Today, some cities in Belgium has banned public commemoration. To me, this is genocide denial. What is UN response to this? In my opinion, a commission should have been created urgently to gather all the necessary evidence in order to initiate legal action. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nziryayo. And the gentleman over there on table, I can see the table number? 13. Table 13 would like to ask his question as well. So he's...
Thank you to the panelists, and our deepest respect to everyone here present. We've had quite a great session of learning, and my name is Paul Uda. I serve as the student representative lead at the African Leadership University. My question here is, what concrete steps, and is directed at Dr. Alice. Yeah, so the question here is, what concrete steps can the UN take to dismantle networks of genocide, denial, and hate speeches across borders? Thank you.
Thank you very much for this very pertinent question. And I think, okay, one very last question from the gentleman at the back of the venue here.
Thank you. My names are Karangwa Semaga Driss Marie, currently president of University of Kigali.
Sorry, can you please repeat your name?
Karangwa Semaga Driss Marie. And also the most recent product of Inaga Mburuzgwa, 5th edition. And first of all, like my previous speaker said, I would like to thank everyone here, especially the guests, for this thought-provoking and awe-inspiring conversation. My question, if the panel may allow, I would like to direct it to Florida Kabasinga, mainly emphasizing on what gaps do you see in the current legal frameworks when it comes to prosecuting genocide denial and revisionism. Thank you so much. That was it.
Sorry, just to clarify your question, you're asking the gaps to prosecuting here in Rwanda, genocide denial?
Yes, mainly nationally here in Rwanda, but also on an international perspective, if possible.
Absolutely, thank you. Because I think she has answered about the international perspective, but maybe she could expand a bit more. So thank you very much for all these questions. I think we're going to start with the minister who got the first question. Mr. Nziryayo asked about whether Belgian cities banning the commemoration could be considered an act of genocide denial. Actually, he affirms it is an act of genocide denial. And if there shouldn't be an urgent commission placed to assess and address this issue.
Bon, évidemment, je ne vais pas parler au nom de la Belgique, mais je l'ai bien dit aussi dans ma présentation, c'est une violation du droit international. Parce qu'actuellement, vous entendez souvent, même sur Twitter et autres social media, le ministre Maxime Prévost dire que la Belgique applique le droit international en ce qui concerne la demande de sanctions qu'il fait contre le Rwanda. Mais la décision du Conseil de sécurité est obligatoire pour tous les États membres des Nations Unies. Idem pour la résolution de l'Assemblée générale. Or, la décision de l'Assemblée générale des Nations Unies du 26 janvier 2018 stipule que tous les États sont tenus de respecter une journée, le 7 avril, de réflexion sur le génocide perpétré contre les Tutsis au Rwanda et donc de laisser se dérouler les commémorations de ce génocide. Si la Belgique les interdit, c'est une violation totale de cette obligation qui s'impose à tous les États membres des Nations Unies. C'est ce que je peux répondre. Sinon, pour les mobiles, ils appartiennent de façon interne à la Belgique.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Ministre. On va se tourner vers les panélistes. Madame Alice Nweri Munderitu, they asked on the concrete steps the UN can take to just dismantle these genocide denial and ideologues.
So first, I can't speak for the UN because I do not work there anymore. I can only speak to what we were able to do. But also, I think it's extremely important. You know, the president of the International Residue Mechanism, IRMCT, Judge Graciela, she's in the room. If she could get an opportunity to speak, I think that would be great, because they've done so much work in terms of putting together the International Residue Mechanism, speaking to both the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia and the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, like taking the work forward. But I think the minister has partly answered this question, because he's spoken about the UN General Assembly, and the UN Security Council, and the naming, of course, the International Day of Commemoration. As we speak, there are commemorations going on right now in the UN. There are commemorations that are going on at the African Union. And it was actually the UN General Assembly also that gave us the name, the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda. It's a UN general resolution. I must say that when I joined the UN, at that time, genocide denial was not something that was being addressed, you know, like in a big way. And Holocaust denial was being addressed, and especially by UNESCO then. And when I went to Srebrenica, and then an incident there made me understand, including, of course, the Commission of Inquiry that was put together by Republika Srpska to prove that a genocide didn't happen in Srebrenica. It made me understand why we have to walk Holocaust denial alongside genocide denial, that you cannot not talk about genocide denial. And then, you know, Professor Gregory Stanton, who we were actually here with not so long ago, he came up with that list of what happens when a genocide is being planned, and his last, number 10, is a genocide denial. So it is, of course, expected that when you plan something of the magnitude of genocide, that then you will deny. So what we did, we came up with the first paper policy by the UN that linked Holocaust and genocide denial. It's available. If you look for it online, it's there. It speaks very specifically to recommendations of what the UN can do, what member states can do in terms of this whole aspect of denial. But I must say that the other thing that needs to happen is it's really a consistent remembrance by UN officials, especially, on the reasons why the UN was created in the first place, because it was created after the Second World War on the never again call. The office that I led itself was created because of what happened here, of the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda. And actually, in the letter that was written by the Secretary General to the Security Council, then Kofi Annan, it says to avoid a repetition of the genocide that happened like against the Tutsi in Rwanda, then we need this kind of office. So the mechanisms are there. The UN has the frameworks, the mechanisms, it has the offices, but of course much more needs to be done. Political will by member states, because as I think, Alex mentioned responsibility to protect. Ultimately, for responsibility to protect to happen, the Security Council has to make a decision. And that decision is the veto powers in the Security Council. I can say with certainty, and I'm saying this with certainty, would almost ensure that we are not able to get another responsibility to protect. Something really needs to shift for us to get to that space where a decision can be made by the Security Council that says we recognize that people here are suffering, are being killed, are being targeted because of their identity, and they are not being protected because of our political positions. Because really, the political positions of the members of the Security Council are usually very clear in the decisions that they make. It's usually very clear that they are speaking on behalf of their government.
Thank you very much. And there's a question that was asked of you, Florida, but I wouldn't want you to just have to repeat everything that you said on the international front. But I think the question that is really asked, if I'm paraphrasing you correctly, it's about, here in Rwanda, we have all these very far-reaching laws, but are they as far-reaching as they should? And in the implementation of these laws, when you're prosecuting these genocide deniers here in Rwanda, what are these major challenges that we're encountering? If you could discuss that quickly.
So the laws here are actually extremely clear, and the elements of the different crimes, denial, revisionism, minimization, the elements are very clear in there, and the jurisprudence that has come out of the courts is quite clear. But when it becomes international, and perhaps because the gentleman who asked the question is a student, I would like to elaborate to show how difficult it is, even for people who committed genocide, for us to get accountability when they're not within Rwandan borders. If there's somebody, for example, who committed genocide, who is suspected of committing genocide and is based, for example, in Johannesburg, the prosecutor in this country who is trying to get the suspect to be extradited has to understand the laws in South Africa, has to put an arrest warrant and an indictment in the language that is going to be used in the court of law in South Africa. In addition to that, the prosecutor in that country is the one who is going to go and argue the case in the court in South Africa. It's not going to be the prosecutor from Rwanda to go there and argue the case. The prosecutor in that country has zero information about what happened in this country. So now flip it over and make it denial. So imagine a prosecutor in this country sending an indictment in the Netherlands that says the words, that person is sitting over there, he's on YouTube saying cockroaches must be killed. And this prosecutor is supposed to understand it in their own context, because they don't know the context in this country. Sometimes those countries actually do not even have a law condemning this kind of stuff. The other thing that is a huge challenge is that in the countries where it's being perpetrated, the people that want to fight back are not equipped with the right information to actually call it out. I'll give you an example. There was a university in the region, I think it was 2 years ago. Rwandan students in that university organized a commemoration, and they sent an invite to everybody, including alumni, and said, we are going to commemorate the genocide against the Tutsi. One of the professors wrote back to everybody and said, be careful not to call it genocide against the Tutsi. because Hutus died and twice not exclude other groups that died. And the students in that university obviously were offended, but they didn't know how to react. And if it comes from somebody of authority, it is likely to carry a lot of weight. So apart from ideologues that know the history of this country that are doing this intentionally, a lot of people that promote genocide, denialism, revisionism, and related crimes, in fact, are doing it out of ignorance, because they probably read Michaela Wrong's book or somebody like that, and they think they've figured it out. But on that group, there was an alumni, a student who had been to that university, who read this and decided to write back to everybody and create a teachable moment. And that is what people need to do. There are people that are in these spaces where this stuff is happening in the different countries, but I believe we need to equip them, to educate them with the right tools to be able to fight back. If you're fighting against denialism, against ignorance, but you yourself are not well equipped, you're not going to be successful in what you're doing. So those are the major gaps of what's going on internationally. But on the ground, because we have real life consequences, the investigators and prosecutors in this country take this seriously, and there are statistics which show different categories of these related crimes and how they are being dealt with in courts of law. So our laws are solid, and over time, because sometimes you get criticized using contexts in the Western world, you're using this to do I don't know what. There has to be an understanding that for us in Rwanda, we actually understand the consequences of this. You cannot use the context in Timbuktu to judge a context in Rwanda. Perhaps because of the history of particular countries, there are things that are condemned in those countries which we would not understand in Rwanda because we don't know. It has not been a historical issue for us. But for us, denial, revisionism, and all of that, we know where it leads.
Thank you very much, Florida. And just one very last question so that we can also have questions for our panelists, Dr. Kimonyo and Dr. Ntung. I understand table 25, there's a question on table 25. If you could very, very briefly just ask. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Gatete Nyingabo and I'm a researcher. I have a question addressed to Dr. Kimonyo. Why is it acceptable that genocide ideology and genocide denial is accepted, encouraged even, and promoted as something enlightened if it is framed as an opposition to the RPF-led, Paul Kagame-led government? So if you present yourself as someone who are opposed to the Rwandan government, to Paul Kagame or to the RPF, you are then given a free pass to say, and the genocide was a lie, or the genocide did not happen, or the Western media's favorite line is they have instrumentalized or sold the genocide to political ends. Why is this something that is acceptable? Would you, for instance, because you do not agree with the government of Benjamin Netanyahu, do anti-Semitism, and that then is accepted and written in the media? Thank you.
Yes, maybe I'm going to repeat myself, but I think at least for a number of countries or states, the issue again is mostly an issue of political consideration. People or countries, even institutions, by the way, having positions according to their own political calculation, being with Rwanda or an institution in Rwanda. So I think that the issue is really political. Now, before I say that maybe you support or oppose the political project that is beneath this ideology of genocide, there is a third position, which is to be indifferent as well. So I think for these three possibilities, you can understand some of the positioning of states and big institutions. Unfortunately, the ethical element of it, of the whole conversation that we are having on genocide ideology, finally doesn't weight that much, unfortunately.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to close this panel by first thanking you, all esteemed panelists, for sharing your experience and your expertise. It's very well appreciated. I would like to thank the First Lady for being with us today. And ladies and gentlemen, everyone who was here with us today, I would like to thank you for your for being with us and listening to this and being very engaged in this conversation. So without further ado, I'm just gonna let Ayan take over. Thank you.
Thank you to all our panelists for this great conversation. We are now going to stretch our legs and take a breather and go to lunch. It will take place at the Fellini and Auditorium Club. Some ushers will be guiding you. And please, let's try to be back in this room at 1:30 p.m. sharp. Thank you and bon appétit.